So in today's video, we're looking at conditional formatting with custom formulas. So if you're not familiar with conditional formatting, I would definitely recommend checking out our basics video first before jumping into this one. So let's go ahead and start with a simple single column rule, and then we'll work our way from there. So select a couple cells there, go to conditional formatting, adjust my apply to range. We'll go down to custom formula. And you can see here it says value or formula. So we're going to cover formulas in here. And so those always start with an equals, and then you can go from there. So we're going to do equals B2 and then another equals. That's typically how these work. And then we're going to do Katie in double quotes like that to match that text. And so what this is looking at is every row is checking, is the value equal to Katie? Now, the complexity with these rules is when you're trying to do an entire row. So if we change this to A2 to F, for example, so as soon as we do that, you can see something maybe a little odd is happening. So our highlighting has now moved into column A, but it's only being applied there. So what's going on? So when you do conditional formatting rules, it's going to start at the top left of your apply to range, so A2 in this example, and it's going to move its way across. And so your custom formulas is going to be applied starting in that A2 cell in this example. So in this A2 cell is asking, is B2 equal to Katie? Which obviously it is. But then you may be wondering, well, why is Katie not showing up? And the reason why is we don't have any dollar signs here, so this cell reference isn't being locked. And so just like if you put in a cell reference and drag it around, it automatically increments both columns and rows. And so when we get to column B here with Katie, it's not asking is B2 equal to Katie, it's asking is C2 equal to Katie, which obviously it's not. And so what you want to do in this case is you'll want to lock this reference. And so if we add a dollar sign, now what it's going to do is starting in A2 is column B, row 2 equal to Katie. And so it's going to go all the way across and say yes in this case. And then this one, now we didn't lock the 2, so that will now be B3. So is in A3, it's going to ask, is B3 equal to Katie? Which in this case is no. And so that goes across and applies it that way. So you can use these dollar signs before the column and or the row reference to lock that position as it's going down through the apply to range. So let me just add a little conditional formatting color there and hit done. And you can see now we're matching what we have here. So to upgrade this to the next level, let's go back to our conditional formatting rule. And what happens if we want to use maybe a reference table, something like this? So what we can do here, instead of specifying Katie in here manually, we could do another reference to another cell. And so we could do J2. Now, I didn't put in any dollar signs, and so you can probably imagine that's why we're having some issues. So whenever you make a reference to a single cell, make sure you lock both the column and the cell reference just like that to make sure it's going to highlight appropriately. And so now if we look, the full row for every Katie row is being highlighted because it's matching this. Now here's the interesting thing is if we change this to Daniel, the highlighting just changed because it's matching what's in this cell specifically. So Daniel, now it's highlighting Daniel. We could change this to Simon, for example, and so forth. All right, so let's change this back to Katie. And if we want to apply this for all the reps we have in this list, then basically we can just copy this formula and then change our reference. So now we want to look at 3, and then we can change our color there, and then we can continue on just like this. So it makes it very quick to duplicate these references, just like that. This one's actually blue. And now I think we have teal. Make sure we're getting these updated here. And finally, violet. Just like that. All right, so now everything matches our key like this. And so if we wanted to use sector instead of rep, then we could just go back to our conditional formatting rule and then swap those references. So this would be K2 and make sure we update our column reference as well. So this needs to be C, and just like that. So you just do the same thing. So make sure your first reference in which column you're looking in gets updated, as well as your reference cell right there. All right, so next, let's go ahead and delete some of these references here. Doop, boop, boop, boop. And then let's just keep this one, but change it back to 2 and yellow. All right. So to add some levels to this, let's look at what else we can highlight. So we've looked at text and how you can set text right within the thing by using double quotes. You can refer to a cell. Now, what happens if you're not doing text? Maybe you want to compare numbers. And so let's look at our column D here. And then let's say anything less than 500. And we want to highlight that maybe in red, something like that. So again, we could restrict that to just that column by doing this. And it would highlight just the number in that column, or we can apply it to the entire range just like that. So one thing to keep in mind is you can stack these rules. So let's go ahead and add another one here, and let's do less than 1,000. Maybe we'll change this to yellow, something like that. And so right now everything looks fine, right? But if we move this up here, you can see everything just turned yellow. And so the reason why is the order these rules appear in is important. And so if you're having something unexpected, you may be looking at one column, but there's a rule on the whole thing. And so if you want to see all the rules on a tab or a sheet, click up here in the upper left to select the entire tab. And then looky there, there's a random rule that accidentally got applied, so I can quickly delete that. So what you want to do is make sure you have these rules applied in the order that you want them to work in. And so for example, this one's less than 1,000, less than 500. So anything in here is going to be true for this one as well. And so some people would then be like, oh, I should make this one, you know, if it's between 500 and 1,000. And so you could do an and put that in there. But you can also just keep it simpler and just stack them in the right order, and then it'll work just like that. So I'll circle back around to how to do multiple conditions in a second. Let's look at dates real quick, and then we'll move back into multiple conditions. So let me go ahead and remove this one, and then let's look at what we can do with dates. So what we can do here is we can do the today formula. And so this automatically generates whatever today is. And so if we do A2 is less than today, if we scroll down, we can see up till today, or technically this is less than today. So yesterday and before is highlighted yellow, and then today and forward is not. So if we did equals then, less than or equals includes today, or we could do greater than today, or greater than or equals to today. So you can see how those rules apply there. You can also do something like -1, and now you can see it's greater than or equals to today -1, which would be yesterday. And so you can use this to highlight, for example, 7 days back and so forth. So right here, let's jump into our and condition. And so if we do and, it allows us to specify two things. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste it. And so this is the only challenging thing with custom formulas, is it puts it all into this little display and you can't really tell. So if you're having issues, you can pull this out of here and then work through it on a cell here, and then look at the trues and falses and then bring it back in here when you're done. So what we're looking at is A2 greater than equals to today -7. And then maybe we'll flip this one then and say less than day. So let's go ahead and do this down to like maybe 3. And so what this is going to do is, if we look up here, we just have a couple days highlighted. And so what it's doing is today -3, so 3 days ago, is where our highlighting starts. And then it's going to end at yesterday, basically is what's going to happen because it's less than today. So if we did less than or equals to, then it'll include today. And so then you could even highlight a little bit less, maybe something like 1, and then it's just going to be yesterday and today. So you could do this within a single cell. You could also stack them just like you did before. So for example, one thing you could do is instead of using this and, you could say A2 is today, and maybe that will be green. And then we can go back and add another rule. And then if this one is today plus 1, and this will be yellow, and then we could do another one maybe if we want 3 days ahead, just like that. And then this one can be another color, maybe orange. And it looks like we don't have any in that time, so let's go ahead and add one here. And I can see really quickly and easily, here's today, here's tomorrow, and here's the day after. And obviously that could be flipped as well if you want to see today highlighted in more of a bright color. All right, so let's look at some other things we can do real quick here. So for example, what if you have a checkbox? So let's switch this to E. And then our options when you have a checkbox are by default true or false. And so if we do E2 is true, then everything where it's checked is going to be highlighted in that color. And if you flip that to false, it's now going to highlight everything that is not checked. And then let's look at real quick this column F. And so maybe we have a couple different options that could show up here. So first of all, let's just put billing in here. And you can see now all the billing issues are highlighted. But what happens if we have something like scope, right? So we have a couple of billing, couple of scope, but I don't want to create a rule for each one. And so what I might do in this case is not equal to blank. And now you can see scope, billing, etc. And maybe this one, because of an issue, we'd highlight more in red. And then anytime an issue is raised, it's going to be highlighted. So that's a way that you can do that. You could also do where it is blank if you want that reverse to be applied. All right, so let's go back to our and condition here. And let's start with maybe our D column here. And let's say everything less than 1,000. And then maybe where the upgrade is applied. So let's just do that. E2 equals to true. And one thing with the and is make sure you add that closing parentheses. And then one little visual thing is Google will turn the border blue when the formula is valid. If we go back, you can see it's red, meaning this formula is not valid as is. And then once I added parentheses, now I can tell it's valid and working. So now if I hit done, so our rule is if the amount is less than 1,000 and upgrade is true. So you can see now that's highlighted. And so if we check this one, it will be true. Check this one, it's not, because this is not less than 1,000. That's a quick way you can do that. But you can also add more. So we could do something like this. And so every and condition, you just separate with a comma. And then every time we're adding a column, we're putting that $ before it. And we could do something like this. So this would be amount, it's less than 1,000. Upgrade is true, and there is a issue because F2 is not blank. So the options here are equals blank or does not equal blank. And that's what those mean. So if we hit done now, we can see if it's less than 1,000, upgrade is true, and there is an issue. So at that point, if I check this one, nothing's going to happen. If I select a billing issue and check this, it's still not going to happen because one of those is not true. This is not less than 1,000. But if we go up here, check it, then it immediately is. And then let's look at one more thing we could add here, just as far as mixing. So we have number, we have true, we have is a blank. And so let's add one more thing here. What happens if we only want to do this if the sector is healthcare? And so we can add that. And notice now I'm doing it at the beginning. So it doesn't matter what order you do these in, but you can do it just like that. And so we can do is healthcare and do something like that. And now if we hit done, we hit this, it's going to be triggering that formula because it's healthcare, it's under 1,000, upgrade is true, and there's an issue. But if we do any of these, then it's going to change and be false. So that's just a way that you can do multiple conditions just like that. So I'm not going to dive into or conditions, but you can do and or, and that's confusing to say, right? You can do and or. Alternatively, you can do or, but you can combine them as well. And so let's look at this. Maybe we want to do if upgrade is true or there's an issue. And so let's get rid of this first condition real quick, just to make it a little more streamlined. And actually, let's get rid of that one. And we'll just do or. So what we're doing here, if there's an upgrade or there's an issue. So you can combine this with a different thing. So for example, we could say, and D2 is less than 1,000, and then one of these. So the way OR works is only one has to be true, and everything has to be true. So we can combine those in different ways to make it work however we want to. So in this case, the and condition is it has to be less than 1,000, meaning that always has to be true. And then only one of these has to be true. So for example, go ahead and hit done here. I can remove the issue and uncheck, and now it's not implied because neither one of these. But if I select the scope, it's highlighted. If I check it, it's highlighted. If I do both, it's highlighted. And so again, it's only checking if this is less than 1,000, and then it's looking at that secondary condition. And so again, if you're having trouble with this, you can use this. Let me show you that real quick in a column right next to it. And so if you drag this down, you will see then where it turns into true. And so if I uncheck this, still true, delete that, now it's false. And if you are working with any more complicated rules, I definitely recommend doing it in this way, because when the formulas get really long, it can be challenging to follow along, because you could add stuff like date, you could add all these different conditions in here and put and, you can do ors and all that different stuff. You can do matches, you can do VLOOKUPs, and all the different things that you can throw in there can make it very long and confusing. And so if you're ever having issues with a conditional formatting rule, or you're having a hard time because that box is so short in there when you do that rule, I would definitely recommend building out in a helper column. So that way you can see what the results are in real time and play around with your different conditions to make sure it's always hitting it correctly. All right, so that is it for today's video on how to do conditional formatting with custom formulas. Make sure to check out the other videos on our channel for more tutorials on both Google Sheets and AppScript. And as always, have a great day.